is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Deadwood, Season 3, Episode 6, A Rich Find. In this episode, Aunt Lou's son shows up kinda out of nowhere, and she's real suspicious about it, and he does not know who he's about to start fucking with, but she do, and she's not happy about this situation. At all. Also, unsurprisingly, Hurst's pride was injured, and he is going for blood soon. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. Many thanks to Patrick for commissioning this episode. So this is I'm going to say this is a come down episode, and I don't mean that in that this is a step down. I mean that this is a bit of a breather from like action and intense confrontation, and instead has a lot of table setting for the next episode I'm suspecting, or perhaps even the one after, but I'm going to say the next one. And what's going on with this, and I find this really interesting, is that everybody is sort of like realizing that they have acted a little rashly in a variety of different situations. And most people seem to be regretting that a little bit. It's not everybody. And there are some people who I think they're like, okay, so I acted a little bit rashly, sure, but I wasn't wrong. It's just that I didn't really like stop to handle it the right way in communicating to you what my intentions were. I feel like that's really what's going on with Ellsworth, for example. That in the end, I think he's right about leaving and letting her be on her own, and that it would be something, as he puts it, that's intolerable to her. I think he's right about that. But the way that he left so suddenly and leaving poor Sophia behind as well, and she notices that he's gone, I feel like he's realizing that maybe handling it that way specifically was not smart. And, you know, I think he can be forgiven. Like, obviously, at the moment that Alma was stoned and trying to seduce him in this weird way, maybe that wasn't the right time to try and have, like, a conversation about it. You know, I get why he thought just walking away was the smart option there. So I'm not blaming him for it, but I do understand his feeling like I could have handled it better for the sake of the little girl, at the very least. I feel really bad about this, guys. I had been floating some theories in the last episode as to why he reacted as strongly as he did. And one of the things I said was, does he think that she's only doing this because she got stoned because she feels like she has to? Like, that was kind of one of my, like, and I have to admit, even as I made that suggestion, I don't think I really believed it, because that is okay, this is me being kind of rude, actually. I didn't think Ellsworth was capable of putting that many, like, thoughts together in terms of her feelings towards him and this whole situation. I kind of didn't give him the credit that he deserved in that regard, because obviously he's a sensitive person and he can see exactly what's happening here. And the way that he talks to her later, and he says, our situation isn't going to grow any more tolerable to you, this arrangement. Now, my question is, if they are going to actually divorce, or if he's going to move out but stay technically married to her. I don't see either one of those options being looked on particularly favorably by the camp. But Alma is obviously in a position of power enough that what people say is kind of at this point not really going to matter. The only thing that I can see really going wrong is Ellsworth moving out and her being at the mercy of whoever decides to like swoop into her house in the middle of the night, because I would not put that past Hurst for a second. This man and Cy are already plotting to use the drugs that she's become addicted to again to poison her and get either overdose her or put something else in it and kill her in order for him to get his hands on her claim. And that's one step away from breaking into the house in the middle of the night and like smothering her to death. I mean, there is absolutely no reason that I can see that he would hold back on that front. So I'm just really, I understand Ellsworth's, and I even respect Ellsworth's feelings on this. Like, I feel like not only is he not wrong, but he's trying to be compassionate to her because he knows, I think that he tries to appreciate the fact that as a woman, she doesn't have a ton of options available to her. And so she's doing the best she can with what is expected and what she's been given. And he seems to like appreciate that and be trying to help make that easier for her to bear. And I just love him so much for that. But I can't help but think his vacating is really going to be much more of a problem than anything in the end. I just want her to be safe. And I would like to reiterate how much I love how flawed Alma is. Not only is she an addict, and not only is she a woman who, you know, the scene, and I wanted to kill her, don't get me wrong, but the scene with Trixie was so well done because that is so on brand for Alma. I like her so much, but that doesn't mean that I don't occasionally want to slap and shake her. And her telling Trixie that she will no longer require her services because Trixie is being confrontational with her about the fact that she has a child in the house and is doing drugs again is one of the better character moments, I think, that, again, I know I've talked about this before, but women characters are so rarely allowed to be as flawed as male characters are. We judge women so much more harshly for the same actions as a man. And this moment of her coming down on Trixie in this insufferably superior way, the smugness of being able to fire somebody who is talking to you in a way that you don't like, just everything about how this goes it's like honestly a regression. I feel like Alma has grown so much in so many ways, and yet because of this drug affecting her judgment and because of the fear of and the guilt of knowing Trixie's 100% correct, Trixie is on point and is telling Alma the very thing that Alma probably has circulating in her own head about herself. That combination is making it so that Alma is being more childish, petulant, and in general, shitty than she would be sober. And I would like to say that she can be pretty childish and petulant and petty when she's sober. So, you know, do the math. But yeah, this whole thing with Alma, and I have to say how much I appreciated Leon. Like, it turns out that Leon kind of warned her when it turns out there's nothing necessarily that's going to happen. And I'm guessing that's why he starts bashing his head against the wall like a house elf. But Leon obviously has some small scruples. Like, I say that with a real asterisk next to it because he's a racist, lying piece of shit. Don't get me wrong. But he draws the line here. And when he goes to see her, he doesn't straight up tell her, but he's very unsubtle. And it's clear to her the way that he says, yes, I'm high and I'm going to stay that way and I'm going to stay alive. And you can see in her face, clearly gets the message that he's trying to tell her that she needs to get off this stuff and she needs to get another supplier. But he has shown his hand. So now if things go, what he thought he was being ordered to kill her right away. And he was refusing to do that. But then when he runs into Sai and Sai tells him, hold off, we're not actually going to go through with that plan yet. He can't actually go back and go through with that plan now at any point because he's warned her. So how is he supposed to carry out that order if it comes? It's too late. He's screwed himself. And I would like to know what he thought he was doing, even if that had been the order right now. Because he's acting like, oh, well, now I've screwed myself and I can't and I think that, again, there's no dialogue explaining why he just goes up to this post and starts bashing his head into it. I think that's what it is. But I don't know what he expected to happen, even if that had been the order. Because if he didn't poison her, if he didn't OD her, and she went to... he leaves her place after telling her to get a new supplier, that he's going to try his own hardest to stay alive and that she should too. He leaves her place and goes straight back to the Bella Union. So what was he intending to do? Was he planning to confront Sai and be like, I can't do it? That's going to result in the same sort of... Leon doesn't have that kind of spine, first of all. So I don't see that he was really going to be able to, have that sort of frank a conversation. Or he's also an addict. All you have to do is withhold his supply and you'll make him do whatever you need to do. So he seems upset about something that, to me, it was inevitable from the choice that he made in the first place. So yeah, I'm just kind of confused about what's going on with Leon. But I will say again that I appreciate that he at least draws the line here. He's not comfortable with this. And I would like to also mention how much respect I have lost for Sai. I have hated Sai since day one. But I still felt like he at least had his shit together. And watching the way that he's being ordered around by Hearst, being humiliated by Hearst, being manhandled by Hearst, that shit's embarrassing as fuck. Sincerely, guys, what is that? I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. And he goes and presents EB with money for information that could embarrass or, incriminate Hearst. But that is such a small step to take. And it is such a, in my mind, superfluous step to take because you and Al both want to take this guy down. But you're not reaching across the thoroughfare to find out what he's up to. And understandably, if he tried that, I have no doubt that Al would rebuff him. Al's not going to trust him with information. But I think if Al got some more details on exactly how Hearst is treating Sai, if Sai was able to get those details to Al somehow, or if he was able to tell Al about those details himself and be sincere enough about it in the moment that Al actually believed him, I can't help but think Al would start to reconsider his innate mistrust. Because it seems so obvious to me, even from the scenes where, like, Sai is in the room with Al, like that one time where Al basically is like, fuck this, I'm leaving. Sai is clearly sort of like whipped by this dude. And I don't think that could be missed by Al. And I think Al thinks that there's something Hearst is holding over Sai's head specifically, that there is something that he's like got on him. And I cannot tell you guys with any degree of certainty what it is that Sai is like hoping to get out of Hearst. Because Hearst clearly does not like or respect Sai and does not take care of his people. Like, we have seen him abandon Francis after Francis killed these women. And considering the other shit that it turns out Hearst gets up to, that was not even that big a deal. He's having people murdered left and right. Francis killing these women is really nothing. And yet he's turning this dude loose after like years of loyal service, obviously. And I can't help but wonder what the fuck Sai thinks is going to happen to him. It's sort of like a woman getting together with a guy who was cheating with her on his wife and thinking that he's not going to eventually do the exact same thing to her. Like, does shit happen and people like change or, you know, sure, occasionally, but usually that sort of thing is a pattern. And Hearst is just such a self-centered egomaniac that Sai is hanging around hoping for scraps to fall from the table. Hearst isn't going to let scraps fall from his table. Like, what does Sai think he's going to profit out of this? When has Hearst actually even promised him anything of substance? Like, and it seems, hopefully, like in this episode, he's starting to come around and realize that. But like, Patrick says, I think Sai just wants to not be killed, so that's why he's working for him at this point. I think that at this point, you're right. I think that he thought he could like maybe play the guy at first, and then he realized that he had gotten in with somebody who was not about to get played, and that he had to like seriously reevaluate how he thought he was going to be able to handle this situation. So I'm hopeful that him trying to bribe EB for information is the first step down a road of him starting to like basically what's the word I want to the first step down the road to plot against Hearst. Because I cannot state with enough vehemence how much I want to see Hearst go down. And I know historically men like this didn't go down. Like, it was rare. But I have not looked up his history, so I genuinely do not know historically what wound up happening to this guy. And I am just really hopeful that something goes terribly, terribly wrong for him, or that we do an Inglourious Bastards and have this man be killed, even though that is not actually what happened. I would just love that. Just give me that, please. I hate him so much. He's such he's toxic masculinity personified. You know, the scene where he talks about how he would like wanted to rape Alma. People talk about, oh, well, you're too ugly to be raped, or you're too fat to be raped, or that guy is too good looking to need to rape anybody. And this is a really good example of what we always try and tell people, which is that rape is not about sex. Rape is about domination, humiliation, power, and oftentimes results in the humiliation, or is the result of a man feeling somehow humiliated. So this moment where she's like trying to make this deal with him, the first thing he says is, should I get a knife and cut my own dick off too? And because he thinks that her trying to negotiate with him in this way is straight up insulting. She's put a ton of thought into this proposal, and he reacts in this way that is, in her mind, completely out of proportion. And then his next instinct is to want to rape her because he wants to put her in her place and remind her that she is nothing. And that is what it's about. Rape is not about sex. People don't rape because they're like, we always talk about it like, oh, he was so horny, he couldn't help himself. That's not what it is. It's he was horny and he did not see her as a person. He saw her as an instrument to something and decided to use her to get whatever psychological satisfaction he could. And that sort of thing, that bizarre humiliation that he felt when she was trying to negotiate with him, the way that he's reacting to Seth pulling him by his ear to jail, like he's ready to burn this entire town down because Seth embarrassed him. It's really, in the end, comes right down to that quote, which is, men are afraid that women will laugh at them, and women are afraid men will kill them. Men can't handle humiliation because toxic masculinity maintains that dignity and having some sort of power over everybody is like where your worth comes from. And the instinct to lash out if that is threatened at all, and to lash out in such a way that you silence everyone, either permanently or with such fear that they never question again, that's a real thing. And this man I thought Sai was like a great example of it. And he is in his way, but he is somehow shockingly less violent. I don't know how that's, Sai has managed to go these entire 2 seasons looking constantly like he wants to strangle Joni to death or one of the other girls to death. And he never actually does it, but he constantly wants to. And I can't believe that we have managed to get another dude into this show that has ousted Sai from that position in my mind. That takes some doing, That's really impressive. And by impressive, I mean really terrible. But Hearst, part of the reason that he got where he is probably because of how terrible he is. Because unfortunately, we tend to reward bad behavior, and I hate him so much, guys. Oh, God, I'm sorry. I know I'm getting caught up. So let me get back to the story, because he's like, when we start off this episode, he is in jail and Charlie Utter is poking and prodding him. Can I just say, the dude who plays George Hearst, his name is Gerald McRaney. I'm going to click on his thing and see whatever, because he looks super familiar. He was in Justified. I remembered that. He was in House of Cards. I think that's what I'm thinking of, because he plays this dude who's essentially a George Hearst as well. He's got a ton of power and can kind of pick who he wants to be president kind of in House of Cards. So I think that's what I'm thinking of. This moment of him staring at Charlie Utter as Charlie brings in all of the postal parcels. I don't know how this guy, who really isn't imposing in any way, manages to look as threatening as he does. There's nothing particular about him that just impresses me, but the look that he gives Charlie while Charlie's bringing this stuff in, it's that phrase, if looks could kill. I mean, seriously, that's so, he looks like he is murdering him in a variety of ways in his mind as he's watching this guy. Meanwhile, Charlie cannot help himself. And I don't think Charlie would have quite reacted this way if he knew that Seth was just going to come right back and open the fucking door and let this man loose. But Charlie does this awesome thing that I love, which is he pretends to not know who Hearst is. Which I know it's such a childish thing to do, but I fucking swear to God, I cackled. It's just, it's like one of the only ways I can think to insult this man. And Hearst knows perfectly well Charlie knows who he is. So it's not like it's really cutting to him. They're playing a game with each other. But it is Charlie pointing out to Hearst, oh, I know how self-important you fucking think you are. And if you think that I'm going to stand here and, like quake in my boots, you got another fucking thing coming. And he's like, between sundown when I left, you must have fucked up in the interval. And is like smiling to himself. And then he goes over to the other, cage, I guess, because I had said earlier in another episode, they don't even have like a jail, do they? And I had forgotten all about Charlie Utter having this like cage built for packages and securing things that they use as a prison, basically. And he goes over to this other portion and yanks the sacking off of this guy's face because he's like, oh, your cellmate. Did he keep you up all at night snoring or making a bunch of noise? And he pulls it off, and it turns out that they put the dead body with the knife still stuck in his chest in the next cage over. And Charlie fucking, I can't believe it. He calls him George, first of all. Jesus, the cocksucker's dead, George. Look, he's got a fucking knife in his chest. That ain't your fucking knife, is it, George Hearst? Okay, look. I'm gonna say it. Charlie Utter's my favorite character. I love so many characters so much in this show. But Charlie Utter in particular just constantly delights me. Every time he's on screen, I feel myself perk up like, oh shit, Charlie's here. What's going to happen? Like, he's so straightforward. He's so unafraid, which is really like surprising considering that he's as pragmatic as he is. Later on, he talks to Seth and he's very much like, Hearst is coming for us. We fucked up. There's going to be consequences. He knows that and he's facing that. And yet he doesn't seem scared. And that's like kind of amazing. He's like just aware of it and like, well, we're going to have to deal with it. And this moment with him poking and prodding, it's so good. I love it so much. So yeah, he just keeps on with this. And then he, finds out later, he watches Seth come in because Seth, he's talking to his wife about what happened, about how he took George Hearst by the ear and led him to jail. And Martha's kind of looking at him like, I think Martha knows that this was not a great idea, but she's very careful to be as supportive as she can at all times. So she's not going to say a word against this right now. She's going to let him do what he's going to do and figure it out. But you can tell that she's sort of like, okay, now that you've stepped completely into the shit, let's see how this works out. And Al winds up coming by. And I liked this because it's the first time that we've seen the two of them meeting in like any place that isn't the Gem. I think they've had a couple of conversations in the street. I don't think Al's come over to the hardware store before, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I feel like this moment of Al coming to Seth instead of summoning him is a pretty big deal because it's sort of him. I feel like it's him respecting Seth a little bit. instead of sending a lackey to be like, Mr. Swearingen wants to see you, he comes himself. He takes the time and puts forth the effort. And in that, lets Seth know, I'm trying to be respectful here. I'm trying to let you... I let you have some time by yourself because I understand why you needed it, because I'm the same way after doing something like what you did. And probably it's better for us to talk about this outside of the gym is probably part of it as well. But also that he is treating Seth as a peer in this way rather than another person who's just working for him. So he tells Seth, this is the wrong time. You can't, like, I don't know exactly what you're planning for your next step, but he just lost his second in command, and he is not in the mental frame of mind to be receptive to anything that you are trying to do here. But yeah, so let's see. I'm trying to find the exact spot. I too, Bullock, when suspecting I've fucked the dog, keenly seek some solitude. Our hour is wrong. Having lost his man Turner, being embarrassed by you, Hurst will be on the muscle, and we, who will be his wrath's object, ought to stay close and confide. Listen. Patrick, if you're here at the moment, is it true that this show, the dialogue in the show is written in iambic pentameter? Because I feel like you mentioned something about that, and I was talking about the show on Doctor Who yesterday when I was recording with Jamie, and she mentioned it as well, but she had not herself researched it because she didn't finish. She put off watching season 3 because she was so sad that the show was going to end after that she couldn't bear to watch. So she doesn't want to spoil herself either. So she hasn't looked into it, which is why I haven't. And the language has always struck me as being really beautiful, but this particular, for some reason, having lost his man Turner, being embarrassed by you, Hurst will be on the muscle, and we, who will be his wrath's object, ought to stay close and confide. It's such a, that the sentiment that he's sharing is ugly. Basically, this man has lost a bunch. He is going to fuck us up because he's pissed, and we need to stick together. It's but the way it's said is so beautiful. And it's little moments like this that make me go, oh, Al, I understand why you have the power that you do, because you can just be so you can just express such simple ideas in a way that makes it feel important and challenging and something that's to be reckoned with. And I just loved this moment. And the way that Seth looks at him when he says this, you can tell Seth hears him. And he says, our alternative is flight. Does that appeal? And Seth says no. And Al says, we ain't that sort, which is maybe more the pity. And Martha, for her part, is standing at the top of the stairs listening. And when he says, we ain't that sort, she gets a little smile on her face, which surprised me, because Martha is, understandably, she wanted to leave camp when her son died. It feels like she's settled in here pretty well, but it would not surprise me if she's harboring hopes of leaving at some point. And I wasn't sure how she'd react to this. I thought maybe if flight were on the table, that she might be fine with that. And it looks like she's actually proud of Seth. She doesn't want him to be the guy who runs. And I love her so much for that, because she is putting her pride in her husband and her desire to do the right thing and stand up to a bully she's putting that before what might be personally more comfortable for her. And that's a really, really difficult thing to do. And it's not like they have anything else in particular keeping them there. So she would totally be forgiven by me if she decided, no, I don't want any part of this. We need to get out of here. Like, I would not blame her an iota. In fact, I might be more of that frame of mind than she is, because her, you know, although I'm saying that with the perspective of a viewer who has seen the things that he has done and said, and she hasn't. I'm not sure if she's quite aware of everything Hearst has done or what he's capable of. I don't know who is, actually, except for Cy. So, in some ways, maybe her desire to stand up to this guy is born from ignorance, which, you know, what can you do? But I really liked this scene. I loved Al coming to see Seth. I loved her supporting Seth, but not, like, saying anything. She's just doing it off in her own way, like, hidden, listening. And I liked the fact that she hid and listened. She let them have their time, but she still, like, wants to know what's going on, and she's aware that Seth might not tell her everything. And there's a respect in the way that she talks to Al that makes me think that she is kind of like coming around on him, because Martha really plays her feelings about people pretty close to the vest. There is nobody that we have really seen her butt heads with except for Alma, for understandable reasons. And I don't always know where she stands. It seems like she really tries to like reserve judgment until she's gotten to know somebody a little bit better. But I feel that the couple of times that she has encountered Al, I mean, she rolls into town the first time and Al is literally one step away from murdering Seth. Like, has the knife about a foot from Seth's back. So it would be understandable that she does not like the guy. But it feels like this moment sort of is her being willing to put that away now. Like, she recognizes the need for an ally and recognizes that Seth isn't able to like pick and choose the way that he would like. There's not a lot to choose from here. And she's being pragmatic. So overall, just 5 stars. I still love Martha, this whole thing. We have Dan, who finally comes out, and forgive me guys if you can hear something in the background. We are having an issue with our tub, and we called in a plumber. So, and the bathroom is right next to my office. So if you can hear that, it's the plumber like pulling things off and poking around in the pipes and whatnot. But hopefully you won't be able to detect that. But Dan comes out, and I forgot, like, because there's like this weird mark on one side of his face, and I was looking at it like, what on earth is that? And I'm pretty sure the captain bit him in the face. Am I wrong about that? It looks like he's got tooth marks in his cheek. That's nasty. Like, biting somebody, I have no aversion to that. I'll tell you that right now. If I ever get in a fight, biting is 100% on the table. I would absolutely bite somebody in a fight. No question. And I'm not talking about a fucking, like, prize fight in a ring. I'm talking about scrapping in the street. You had better believe you are losing a couple square inches of flesh somewhere, because I will get to you. I have no problem with that at all. However, the fact that it's on his face, in particular, is really gruesome to me. It somehow takes it up several notches. It's just totally different than if he had bit him on the arm or the neck even. The face, Jesus Christ, you know? So he is not really wanting to like talk about what he went through, understandably, with Johnny, because Johnny doesn't get it. Johnny's trying so hard. I would like to register that. Johnny is putting so much effort into being good to Dan. Like, he wants to be a good friend. He wants to be supportive. honestly, it's really sweet. As annoying as Johnny can be, I actually have grown to really like the guy. But he's simply not quite capable of understanding where Dan's coming from. So Dan goes and talks to Al, and Al tells him that he tried to explain to Johnny how different it is in a fair fight, that it's a whole other situation. And Dan seems really grateful that not only does Al understand, but that he has been trying to let other people know as well, so that they will kind of lay off a little bit. And I really like the part where he says, watching the light go out of his eyes to Al, which is almost exactly what Al said to Johnny. And Al responds with, well, the one eye that you left in its socket. And Dan, who has looked pretty solemn, he cannot help but kind of start laughing. Like, it's just a moment of like, yeah, what I went through was fucked up, and I killed a guy, and it was brutal, and it was in front of everybody, and that sucks. But also, I beat the hell out of that motherfucker, and that must be really satisfying. Like, damn. So I loved that between the two of them, and I just really enjoyed Dan trying so hard to get it together, you know? All right, let's talk about, real quick, I don't want to talk about him. Everybody, can we just agree to get together and drown Steve in a trough somewhere? I don't know how this man has managed to stay alive with the number of people that he has fucked over and, like, made angry. He is such a shit. He is such a shit, guys. I swear to God. It's just like, I hate Hearst in, like, the evil supervillain sort of way. But I hate Steve probably just as much. It's just, he doesn't have the kind of power, so I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid of him in that I know that he could fuck up the lives of some of the black folks in this show pretty badly. So I still worry about that. But I, like, he's standing out here. I think it's supposed to be like, he's standing out by the Whiskey Shots table that's outside of Nuttall's bar. And he's just yelling about what happened with Hostetler. And this show has a weird penchant, especially in this episode, but overall it's true, has a weird penchant for having their characters monologuing. A lot of other shows don't really do this the same way. And it's always different. Like, we've got E.B. who monologues with Richardson. There's another person there, but Richardson doesn't speak. Or he speaks like one or two words. And otherwise, it's all E.B. and he's just, going off on his tangents. We have this monologue with Steve standing in the thoroughfare just yelling at people. And we have a monologue later with Leon, who is like yelling at his own reflection in a puddle. And then we get a monologue with Jane, who's drunk and yelling at God knows who. She thinks there's somebody there. I don't know what happened. But either way, we get 4 instances of people straight up talking to themselves. And it's a really weird, I'm not exactly sure if there is supposed to be like a deeper meaning behind all of those things taking place within the same episode or what. But, who knows? I just found this weird. Oh, Patrick's here. Sorry, my connection crapped out. Yes to the iambic pentameter. No shit, Patrick. I'm in the middle here of talking about how interesting I think it is that there's like monologues. And now that you've said that about the iambic pentameter, I'm like, are they just trying to do like a Shakespearean thing overall and have these, soliloquies essentially? The thing about a soliloquy is technically you're supposed to be totally alone. So Jane's would work. Some of EB's might work because Richardson isn't always there, but he tends to be. But one could argue that Richardson really doesn't even count. But Leon and Steve's, they're in the middle of the thoroughfare surrounded by people. So I guess it would just be a monologue and not a soliloquy. It just feels like they're totally alone, though. It is performed like a soliloquy, you know? But anyway, so he's yelling about what happened with Hostetler, and tries to say, like, that Hostetler, that his death was an accident, because he cannot face the fact that he essentially pushed this man to suicide. And that's a really tough thing to say. Like, somebody who commits suicide, they have chosen that. They have made their choice, and I'm not going to rob them of the agency of that choice. But it would be untrue to pretend Hostetler would have done this if Tom or if Steve weren't involved. Like, the way that Steve behaved towards him was an enormous factor, and he can't cope with that. And I think that he is, like, experiencing a lot more guilt than he expected, Steve is, because this is just a black man who killed himself, so who cares? But there's something about the way that he's talking about this that makes it seem like, no, this affected him. For some reason, this is like broken through, and he is drunker than we've ever seen him. Throughout this entire episode, he gets drunker, where by the end, it's startling that he's able to even form a sentence. Like, it's pretty bad. He plays drunk. Everybody in the show, honestly, when they're drunk, they play drunk pretty well. Jane can be a little bit over the top, but then there are people who, when they are drunk, are over the top. So, you know. So anyway, he's over here trying to yell about the fact that everything that people have heard is not true, that Hostetler died completely by accident. And meanwhile, the general and Jane are building a coffin. And I want him to die so bad. I want him to die so bad, guys. I just want Steve. He's standing there and looks up, and he sees Odell riding in on a horse, and kind of like goes, oh shit. And he goes back into, and I'm not sure if he thinks that because Odell is black, that he must be connected to Hostetler, and this is somebody who is like coming to get retribution or what, but there's something about his like attitude there that makes me feel like there's definitely fear. And it could just be the fear of this dude being black. That could be all it is, because Lord knows Steve is afraid of anybody who isn't white, and even those who are white also. But he can at least lay his fear and insecurity on people of another race a lot more easily than he can when it's other white folks. So that's what he does. And there is an amazing scene later where he is standing in Nuttall's, and Nuttall has gotten up and moved to the other side of the room because he cannot stand to be near this man. At which point I'm like, why don't you just kick him out and tell him to never come back? I wish you would. But because he could do that. He would be allowed to do that. But instead, he just like lets this guy go railing on. And he says something like about how Steve has driven away all the other business. And Steve says, maybe, Tom, it's the chill in here is what does it when every edifice else in camp's been swanked up and seen to. Look inward, why don't you, instead of always blaming the other. Yo. That is the most infuriating thing in the entire world. Have you guys ever had that? Had somebody who is so guilty, like almost their entire personality is built around a certain attitude, but they don't see it and accuse other people of it? I have had that. I have seen that from a few people. And there is nothing more galling. Oh my God, it makes me so angry. So this moment of him being like, why do you always blame other people? Holy shit, Steve. I wouldn't have blamed Tom if he had just pulled out a pistol and shot him in the face right then. So he's standing there, and this is when Odell walks up. And Tom comes up, shakes his hand. Welcome to the number 10. My name is Tom. Harry'll take your order. His name is Steve. And then he walks the fuck out. And you can tell Odell is like, something's weird here. And Steve just stares at him and then like turns his back because it's not even worth like facing the man when he talks to him. But Steve looks like he's like about to collapse. I don't know what he thinks is going on. I hate him so much. And he is standing there when later on the general comes in. Now let's talk about what's going on with Odell. Because fucking Hearst is let out of prison. And he is looking for somebody to give him back some of his dignity. And okay, I gotta give it to him. This actor is really good at being threatening. Like, this is just, being threatening is not as easy as so many people seem to think it is. Like, there's something about the way he gets it across that there is a deep violence and rage just under the surface that he is fighting to keep down. It's like Seth, but way darker and much scarier. Seth, you trust that his judgment will win out in the end. And sure, somebody might wind up beat to fuck or dead, but he will regret it and internalize it and try to be better, and is struggling all the time with his temper because he knows inherently that his temper is kind of, just a huge flaw. With Hearst, he's fighting down his rage because it's not time yet. And that's the part that's scary, is that everybody around him, when he is in this sort of mood, knows it's a matter of time. Seth quenches it, thinks better of it, tries to change his approach or avoid the person or whatever. He tries to leave behind grudges as best he can because that's the emotionally mature thing to do, and it's a way to be a good person. Hearst does not leave that shit behind. Ever. He holds on to all of it and bides his time and waits until he can do the most damage. And everybody around him is unsure when that dam is going to break. So this scene, he walks in. Odell is in his mother's rooms. She's delighted to see him. There's a moment where E.B. tells Richardson to tell him, Odell, that he isn't allowed to stay at the hotel, which is just super gross. E.B. is so disgustingly racist throughout this episode. I hate him so much. Moments where he's like, well, I didn't tell you right or left because I wasn't sure that you could even tell the difference. Like, things like this. And the fact that he like doesn't even say it to their faces. He says it behind their backs. It's just so, like, fucking petty and small. But Odell is in her room, and this is a really good example of the sort of, people talk about like going back in time and how interesting it would be. But there are things that it would never even occur to me would be considered improper. And Aunt Lou having her own son in her room is one of those things. She acts like it's ridiculous that Mr. Hearst would be upset by it when her son brings it up. But then when Mr. Hearst walks in, he is obviously not pleased that she assumed he'd be fine with it. And I'm not sure how much of their conversation he overheard. because she's sort of imitating him to her son. And I don't want to say making fun of him, but to somebody like Hearst, I could see him taking it that way. Because she's sitting, let's see, Liberia. Oh, right. I'm going to read this, and I don't have a lot of time left, but still. Her son had been in Liberia. And he says, he mind me here for his say-so? How's he going to mind you come to see your mother? Here in your room? He give me this room. You stay here, Aunt Lou. Who says what? No goddamn never mind me. So she says that, and it seems like she's sort of praising him, I think. Like, basically, you stay here, and I don't give a shit if people give you shit because you're black. You're still staying here. But when he walks in, it seems pretty clear that he does not, in fact, approve. And this sets the tone for their whole relationship. Like, every time that he stumbles across her son anywhere near her, and not, like, in the room. He's out in the yard with her at one point when she's hanging up laundry. He acts like, well, I told you could stay in the room, but you're not allowed out in the yard. Like, there's always this weird power play. Like, this guy, like, Odell is overstepping himself. And it's like it's just so, it's so impossible for me to predict, and yet it makes such sense with somebody who is like Hearst, who wants to be in power and does not want to feel like people are undermining him, and certainly doesn't want a black child of a servant undermining him. It makes a lot of sense that he would take issue with everything this kid does, but I just never saw that coming at all. And it's a really uncomfortable, frustrating series of moments. And also, the whole thing with this, because her son, it turns out, he like tries to act like he was in Liberia and got her letter and came to see her. But his mother is like, yeah, I don't buy it. I don't think that's what happened. I think you came here to see Hearst and you didn't even know I was here. And he tries to be like, I used my common sense to tell me that wherever Hearst was, you would also be. But then he drops word to Hearst about a gold claim in Liberia. And he acts like he's going to be able to negotiate with Hearst over this. And his mother is trying desperately to convince him to leave camp. She gets as much money together as she has. She goes to the general to try and get him to convince him to leave. The general is even offering up money that he has from the sale of the livery to get him to leave, which Steve overhears. And I'm worried about that. I'm worried about Steve trying to get his money back from the general, to be honest, but that's a whole other thing. And this kid won't take anybody's advice. Odell really thinks he's going to be able to sit down at a table with somebody like Hearst and negotiate with him and make a deal, and that Hearst is going to take him at all seriously or honor any agreement that he makes with a black man. Give me a break, kid. No. He doesn't understand who Hearst is and how just because Hearst likes his mother enough and treats his mother well enough, that does not transfer. This is not a man with like any affection beyond the very bare minimum that he can muster up for Aunt Lou. So I'm like, she's hustling and says, you're not going to take him away from me, heading back to the hotel. And I think it's Al who says she's not fast, but seems full of purpose. And I think she is 100% correct to feel the way that she does. And I'm really concerned because I like her. And I do not want to see anything happen to Odell. Not because I particularly like Odell, because I don't. He seems like a real shady character who overestimates himself. But I care for her. And I can't help but think if something happens to her son, something happens to her. I don't see her being able to continue to work for a man who killed her kid. And I don't see Hearst allowing her to leave. So I'm worried about this. So yeah, I think that's about everything this episode. Oh, there's one small scene that I did want to mention. Well, there's two actually. There's the one where Joni comes and retrieves Jane, and I was very happy to see that they are kind of like coming back together again, hopefully for good, but we'll see. I liked that a lot. And I also really liked the scene between Al and Trixie, where she tells him that she wants to come back and turn some tricks. And he's like, you dumb bitch. You got out of this place and you're doing better. And what is the fucking, how could you be this stupid? And he won't entertain it for a moment. And I actually really liked it. And I think in a way she kind of liked it too. He's looking out for her in his terrible backward way. So anyway, all right, I'm out of time and I have another one coming up, so I really do have to go. But thank you again to Patrick for commissioning this. I can't believe how close I am to the end of the season now. I'm going to be sad once the show is over. But yeah, guys, thank you all so much for listening. Hope you've enjoyed the coverage, and I'll see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.